Hello, and welcome to the Boffin Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello, and welcome to the Boffin Buzz, episode 4. Episode 4 already. This is incredible. It is, being October the 12th is National Farmers Day. And so we have got a farmer who barely needs any introduction at all. Jake Freestone, many of you will know, is one of the leading farmers, if not the leading farmer, in the UK. And he is also farm manager at Overbury Enterprises. Jake is, in fact, I never know quite where Jake finds the time to do everything that he does. And I'm not entirely sure whether we've got time to discuss everything that he does as well. But we'll do our best over the next 40 minutes or so. So, Jake, delighted to have you with us here today. What would be great, Jake, is if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself to begin with, about Overbury, the farm that you manage, just by way of a brief introduction.
Absolutely, Tom, and I'm delighted to have been invited along to the podcast as well to talk a little bit about some of the exciting things that we do here at Overbury, and it's a real pleasure. A lot of the things that we've been involved with for a number of years as well, which is good for continuity and building relationships, which I think is really important in agriculture. Overbury. Well, I came here in 2003, so 20 years, which has flown by actually.
20 years ago.
Yeah, they say time flies when you're having fun, and I guess it probably does. I moved here from Lincolnshire. I worked for Velcourt for about 4 years, managing farms for them.
I was going to say, did you come from a farming background? Were you always been in farming?
No, I haven't. No. So my dad's a head teacher, mum's an infant school teacher in Bristol, and I got my farming bug from my godfather Martin Riley and Teresa, who farmed in Bedfordshire, Carlton, Bedfordshire, milking Jersey cows. And I can remember as a kid weekend holidays with them, and then actually going up for a week in the February half term and a week in the summer. Mum and Dad would put me on the bus from Bristol bus station, and was told not to get off until Teresa or Martin picked me up at the other end, and I'd come back and basically refuse to wash any overalls that I'd worn on the farm, covered in cow muck, and that was when I was about 11 or 12, and I got a job on a little dairy farm with Rob and Pam on a Saturday, milking 40 cows. A great insight into rural life, really, for a sort of a city kid, I suppose. And loved it. Never really wanted to do anything else. I went to Sealhain Agricultural College. I was getting brochures from them and Harper and those two actually from age 12 sort of thing. And how many A levels do I need to be able to get to agricultural college? And that's what I wanted to do. So I had a great 4 years there, 91 to 95. I worked in Hampshire for a sandwich year at just outside of Alresford on a farm there. Then went to the Duke of Buccleuch in Northamptonshire at Boughton, BQ Farms, 95 to 99, and assistant manager there. So moved around a little bit, had various experiences, different soil types, different enterprises. I love the mixture of livestock and crops. I also really enjoy being part of a wider team as well, not just in agriculture. So here at Overbury, we've sort of got forestry, building team, keepering team, and a vibrant community.
What's really interesting, because they do say that it's very difficult, that this is an industry that's very difficult for the new entrant. Typically, most of the farmers in the UK are, next generation farmers, aren't they? That their parents or their grandparents or whatever did it, and there are a lot of people who come back to farming as well. Perhaps they have a spell outside farming and then they come back into it. But you came into it without a farming background. You were determined to get into the industry. I'm sure that there may be many people listening who are trying to do the same. So what would your advice be to those people who don't come from a farming background, who don't have all the connections perhaps that some people in the industry do have, but are determined to get into the industry like you were?
I mean, it is a hugely rewarding industry. We're very privileged to be able to look after land and livestock for people. For me, the route in was farm management as opposed to never having enough capital to set up on my own or to rent land, or didn't really actually probably think that that was a way in sort of 25, 30 years ago. So I think the advice for new entrants coming in, not from farming families or farming experiences, really get as much experience as you can across a range of different enterprises. Because I think when you're younger and you're new into it, you don't really appreciate all the opportunities that there are out there, and to specialise too early might kind of restrict you in terms of where you might want to go, where you could end up. So as much experience as you can. And I know that's difficult on farms these days with health and safety legislation. You know, it is difficult, and farms are busy. There's fewer people, so the opportunity to sort of shadow workers. Machinery is much larger now, so actually it's not something you can put, a Saturday kid on anymore. So it probably is harder. But if you are determined to do it, and that's what you want to do, there are always ways to do it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's the enthusiasm, I think, that shines through, isn't it, Jake, in those instances? And we can all see examples of that. But let's turning now to Overbury. And as you say, so you moved there in 2003. How did that come about? How did that job opening come about then?
Advertised in the Farmers Weekly. Yes, I applied, and sort of three interview process. We moved down here then. So
what appealed to you about the Overbury estate then?
So the appeal was, I mean, it's a beautiful part of the world. You've been here, Tom. It is stunning. Yes.
No, I absolutely agree with that. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. If for those who haven't been to Overbury, then no, it's a proper English estate. It's so well managed, of course, and it's beautiful. It's got some beautiful parts to it. Every moment that you'd spend at Overbury is a joy. But no, carry on.
It is. It's a super place to live and have children running around here as well. That's hugely important. The family that own Overbury have been here for 300 years, and they intend to make it a viable and sustainable business for the next 300 years. And to me, in agriculture, that's really important, because it's not a 3-year FBT type deal in my eyes. It's a long-term investment in time and effort and energy. A lot of tears and blood have been sort of shed along the way, literally at times. And to be able to mould and look after something this special for a few years in my kind of life and career, I suppose, is something that's really important. So Penelope, the managing director here, is the 8th generation to own Overbury. And her kind of enthusiasm and drive for the environment, for education, for food production matches mine as well. So we're very much aligned in terms of the goals for the business, and how we can deliver that across all the different things which we'll talk about today.
Well, yes, that's. I wanted to sort of zone in on that, if you like, in terms of because you have got this challenge as the farm manager of. You've got to deliver on the bottom line, make sure it's profitable, but at the same time, as you say, you've got this 300-year history, and so you've got the sustainability of the estate as a whole to look after as well, and to manage and to steward. So, what are your priorities? How do you manage that balance?
So we've got a good team here. So I'm responsible for all the farming activities, and then we've got an estate manager, Liam, who runs the sort of the property side of things as well. So between both of those enterprises, there is a significant amount of sort of planning and organisation for sort of tax, for day-to-day operations, and those are all part of sort of the management and decision-making process, I guess. From the farming point of view, what's the most important thing that we are able to influence, I suppose, is our soil. And that is pretty much the starting blocks, if you like, for our philosophy. And just over my shoulder, you'll see the old LEAF
Yes.
wheel, Integrated Farm Management wheel, LEAF being linking environment and farming. And actually, we have put soil at the heart of what we're doing. And as a result of that, we have so many other wider environmental benefits and production benefits as well. And those are just really starting to come to fruition now.
Right.
So soil is important. The team that work with me are also hugely important. An average workforce that has been employed here for over 40 years.
Wow.
So three of the guys here, hugely experienced, came here straight from school. Their fathers worked on the farm beforehand. So there's a huge amount of tradition there. There's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of skill, which enables me to sort of fiddle around with some of the other things, really, as opposed to being quite so attached to a tractor seat all the time. So I'm very fortunate. We're very fortunate to have a team like that.
Well,
Doing the day jobs, if you like.
Yeah, well, it's those aspects that we want to sort of drill down into, if you like, Jake. And first of all, as you say, you mentioned your the soil, which is at the heart of what you do. And we've got a really exciting project coming up, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about in a minute, Jake, which I know you're going to want to be involved in. But hold your thoughts on that one. Let's talk about LEAF and that circle that you've got in the background there. As far as I know, this sort of represents, what you do in terms of your sort of community engagement, and demonstration activities, which, as you mentioned just now, is something that perhaps lies on the periphery of the actual core business activity of the farm. But I know that it's very important to you. So tell me first of all about your involvement in LEAF, and why you're involved in it and what that brings for you.
Yeah, so we've got a really long-standing commitment with LEAF. We started working with Caroline back in 2004 when we joined. So yeah,
sorry, that's Caroline Drummond.
Caroline Drummond, yeah, who we sadly lost in May 2022, which was a huge shock to everybody, and she left a massive hole in the whole industry, actually.
Yeah, so Caroline led LEAF right from its inception back in the mid-90s, I think.
She did, 1991.
She really was.
Yeah.
She was the driving force behind it and led it to where it is today. But yeah, no, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, so hugely inspirational lady. And so LEAF and the integrated wheel over here talks about how the 9 aspects, from community engagement to nature and conservation, energy efficiency, soil, crop production, pollution control, livestock health and welfare, all interlinked to each other, like the wheels on a bike or the spokes within a wheel. And that really resonated with how our philosophy about managing Overbury and how everything is connected is all linked together. So there was a huge parallel with the charity that is LEAF and our business, and part of that was LEAF Mark, so quality food assurance, which we joined in 2007. And then in 2012, we launched as a LEAF demonstration farm.
Sorry, so LEAF Mark, this is a standard that's actually carried on supermarket food, I believe, isn't it? Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. And actually, that's gone from strength to strength. It was always very popular in Waitrose and M&S on fresh salads, baby leaves and things like that. And LEAF Mark is now rolled out across the majority of the large supermarkets. So Tesco's is also using LEAF Mark now. I think Lidl's and Aldi are also doing it. So LEAF Mark is kind of the creme de la creme, I suppose, of environmental and sustainable food assurance. So you've got Red Tractor doing all the health and safety, food safety kind of things.
And it's independently verified as well, I believe, isn't that right?
It is independently verified, yeah.
Yeah.
So for us, and that again aligned with the quality of food that we want to produce here, it makes sense to be a leaf mark farm.
And there's an important demonstration aspect to that, and farmer engaged, well, both farmer and public engagement aspect to the work that you do. So, could you just so
Yeah.
first of all, in terms of public engagement, why is that important?
So with our leaf demonstration hat on, in 2012 we launched, and we have a very positive story about agriculture, food production, and environmental management here to be able to tell. And farmers need to tell that story themselves. Nobody else is going to tell that story on
Just
our
tell
behalf.
me why farmers need to tell that story.
So it's our kind of responsibility, I guess, to inform the public and our customers about how we manage food and the environment. There's a huge amount of bad publicity. There are bad practices. None of
Yeah.
us are perfect in what we do, and they need calling out. But actually, there's an awful lot of really good production system here in the UK. We've got a great climate. We can grow lots of grass. Our animal welfare standards are the highest in the world. How we manage the environment, is on the whole really, really good.
Yeah,
So
and
we need to be able to sell ourselves
yeah.
so that when the customer is in the supermarket, it sees a British product and it says, "Aha, I know about this because I've seen a YouTube video from Jake during his harvest, and he was growing milling wheat that goes into this bread, and I know where that is produced," rather
Yeah.
than here's a loaf that's made up some wheat that's been imported from somewhere else around the world. You don't know how that product is grown and what's been applied to it, which are chemical products that aren't necessarily licensed here in the UK for food or environmental standard reasons, but are allowed elsewhere. So actually, that's to me, we need to be able to share all of that positive story.
Oh, exactly, and I suppose if we're not selling those positive stories, then the only things that the consumers hear about are the negative stories, or people who project their own ideas about farming onto others, which perhaps aren't accurate. If we're telling our own story, that is hopefully the story that they hear.
Absolutely, and I think the challenge we have is that there are so many different channels that these stories can be told along or in. So whether that is the written word, articles on the radio or television, but then you look at social media, X that was Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. All of these channels are available, free and instant, and messages, right or wrong, informed or uninformed, are very easily popped on there and off they go. And once they're out there, it's a bit like I did a talk at Cirencester once at the university there about social media, and social media is like toothpaste. Once you've squeezed the toothpaste tube, it's out there. You can't put it back in. And that is a really important message for people that are involved in social media. Your digital footprint, your pictures, although you might delete it from your screen or something, it's all still out there. So,
Yeah.
and very often the bad news stories are out there very quickly, and that's the thing that people will remember. They won't remember the follow-up thread that's come back down and say, well, actually, hang on a minute, that's not right. We do it this way, or there are other alternative methods. You need to source or procure, buy the ones that are better for the environment, for the livestock, or whatever. So it is a huge challenge,
Yeah,
absolutely a big challenge.
but likewise, the more of us who join that and are putting out the positive messages, then we can help, turn public opinion in favour of farmers. I also wanted to talk about, the role that you play in demonstrating farming activities to other farmers as well. And I know that that's another important part of your leaf role. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, it is. That's a hugely important role, as well as communicating with our customers and anybody who will listen really. For
Mm.
me, it's about influencing or trying to influence and show other farmers that there are different ways to do things. We're quite a traditional sort of industry, I guess, and we're in a huge period of change at the moment with the basic payment scheme being reduced, which is sort of the subsidy payments that we've historically received. That's all changing and transitioning into sustainable farming incentives, which are rewarding farmers, probably not enough money to be honest, for changing in practices. So we are in a huge sort of transitional change at the moment, and the opportunity to help encourage farmers to change their farming systems for economic benefits as well as environmental and social benefits
Mm.
is something that I feel really passionate about, and I try to do, and I don't do enough of it probably, my YouTube channel with more examples about how we're doing things differently. We came into this
Mm.
system back in 2011 from an economically driven position. We could see payments, 10, 12 years ago, we could see payments being reduced. We could see cost of production going up. And actually, the decision to move into this type of system was based on how do we become more efficient, how do we use less diesel, spend less time on a tractor seat. So it was very economically driven, spreadsheet derived, and once you start making these changes to a more regenerative system, so direct drilling, cover cropping, changes and tweaks to the rotation, livestock moving around, these things have all they've all added benefits that we had no idea that they were going to come along to the farming system. So
Mm.
increased water infiltration, increased soil organic matter, more farming birds, more diversity of species of those birds. Those are all actually quite exciting things to be able to measure and monitor change over.
Yeah.
But we had no idea that was going to happen. We were looking,
Yeah.
right, how do we grow this wheat cheaper so that we can remain competitive with a wheat grower in the States or Ukraine or somewhere else.
Yeah, and I mean, the interesting thing about what you've done there is, as you say, you came at it from an economic point of view, in terms of reducing your cultivations, diesel use, and so on and so forth. And there have been some nice spin-off benefits, in terms of the nature and the biodiversity that you've got on the estate that perhaps we'll talk about in more detail. But the interesting thing is that you've opened up a sort of sales avenue for those aspects as well through the Green Farm Collective, I believe. So tell me a bit more about the Green Farm Collective. Who you're involved with there, and how what that's doing for Overbury.
Yeah, so it's early days at the moment. We're a group of farmers who see soil health at the heart of how we should be managing our businesses. There's 4 farmers kind of directly involved in it at the moment. Mike Kavanagh, who's in Shropshire, and Tim, Staffordshire, Angus Gowthorpe up in Yorkshire, and myself here on the Gloucestershire sort of Worcestershire border. And we're looking at soil and carbon, biodiversity, and also now regenerative food assurance standards. So can we quantify regeneratively farmed wheat and actually add that as a premium to the farm business? So all of these things that we've been doing here, we have still been selling our produce into a standard market. We're not getting a premium for stopping soil erosion or capturing carbon out of the atmosphere and locking that away in our soils. And actually, we think that there is a premium there to be had for farming in this way, both in terms of carbon capture. That's a huge social good, and it's a very topical conversation at the moment with net zero and the kind of government's move to maybe delaying some of those targets, which I'm not getting too political, but we haven't really got time to waste on that score.
Yeah.
But then also biodiversity as well. Biodiversity is a huge benefit to farming this way. We're not using insecticides. Fungicide use is drastically reduced. We're still using it, but with our integrated farm management hat on, which is back here, those are the last things that we would kind of want to use, if you like. There are rotations, there's varieties, there's things like that we can do beforehand. So all of these things are great for the environment, great for the business, but actually we should be getting a premium for providing a premium product in this way. So the Green Farm Collective is aiming to do that, looking at carbon calculators with Trinity AgTech's Sandy platform, which does arable crops, it does grass, it does livestock, so you can get whole farm carbon position. And then us, as an organisation, we have to work out what we do with that carbon. We need to use that carbon internally. So the nursery school is carbon neutral. So the shoot or the building team or the office gang is all carbon neutral before we can look at exporting and selling some of that carbon.
Right.
So I don't think we'll necessarily be into that carbon market particularly soon, but where I think we can deliver, and Mike and Tim have both done carbon and also biodiversity, is actually creating links with local businesses to provide areas of wildlife habitat. We'll call it biodiversity, but it's areas of habitat, so pollen and nectar mixes, wildflowers. Local businesses can sponsor that area. They can then utilise that over the year, bringing team members out to have a look around the farm, to explore a little bit more about how their food is produced and all the things that we do with a demonstration farm.
Yeah.
But actually they're contributing financially to the sustainability of the business, but also to the sustainability of their local environment. And I think that is probably where the Green Farm Collective has got some significant strengths.
Yes.
In pulling that together.
Now, of course, the aspect of that, one of the things that you illustrate is that what you're asking people to do, local businesses and consumers and so on, is to pay for those elements that you're delivering on farm, and you've got the structure there. But what I'm interested to know, Jake, is how you actually measure and monitor that on your own farm, because surely the people who are buying that off you need some reassurance that you're actually delivering what you say you're delivering. So now I know that you've been involved in on-farm trials for some time, and I guess that's an aspect to it, and that's kind of wrapping the science around some of these areas that we've been talking about, the areas of soil health that you, as you say, are so important. So could you just tell me, give me an idea of why the on-farm trials that you do, some of the methods that you have of monitoring these aspects, how you do that?
Yeah, so trialling new ideas, new techniques, new products on farm is hugely beneficial. It's the only way really farmers can move forward. Things like the recommended list that are national have a huge role to play, but actually there are a lot of sort of local specifics, which unless you're playing around with them at home, are very difficult to sort of quantify. So we've been measuring and monitoring trials for a long time. Things sort of organic matter sampling going back nearly 20 years. And then more recently worked with Aurea and Redicott and Boffin with the seed control unit and NIAB as well on that. So working together collaboratively with different partners with different strengths is hugely important as well. That sort of collaboration within the whole industry is really important.
Yeah, so actually, Jake, that's one aspect again that I wanted to focus on, this collaborative aspect, because I know that this is very important. We've touched on it earlier, with your involvement on Twitter and things like that. Why is it important to share the information? So, you've been monitoring it quite closely, but why is it also important to share it as well? Is that just a feel-good factor for you, or is there more to it than that?
I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier on about demonstrating that there are different ways to do things, and here's the evidence. Yeah. So, it's very easy for people to say, that won't work on my farm, or my soil is different, or we don't get that much rainfall, or we get too much rainfall, or whatever, the day lengths aren't long enough, and whatever the kind of the excuses are. So if I can put pictures, videos, just starting to get into TikTok and things like that now, which is a whole new ball game of social media skills, then we are literally demonstrating that no, these things can happen, and here's the evidence. And yes, it's on my farm, but on my soil type, which is, it's not unique. And actually, with my Nuffield scholarship hat on, which I did in 2013, going around the world looking at regenerative agriculture as it turned out to be. I didn't really know that at the time. Everywhere in the world was already successfully doing these sorts of techniques: direct drilling, using cover crops, livestock integration. In Ireland, 1.2 meters of rain, still successfully been direct drilling for 15 years when I was there 10 years ago, down to somebody in Oklahoma that had 700 mil of rain, same as us, but just massively fluctuating temperatures and much higher temperatures and really windy. So being able to get out around the world has been hugely advantageous to me in terms of opening my collaborative net, if you like, as to who's out there and who we can talk to, but also seeing it for my own benefit as to how these techniques are deployed around the world.
Which of course, where the on-farm trials that you've been doing. I know that you've done an awful lot of work with cover crops, for example. Could you just looking at that work in particular? How does that? What's been the aim of that work? Who have you been working with on that?
On the cover crop side of things.
Yeah.
So this was Kellogg's supply chain, so Kellogg's Origins group that we're involved with, and 2014 we did some trials, different cover crop mixes and straits, to have a look at what was their impact on soil health, and then ultimately through to yield in the following spring barley crop.
So how did you measure that then? How did you monitor it?
Yeah, so that was monitored with in-field sampling done by NIAB as well, actually. Looking at plant counts, looking at sort of beetle counting, insect numbers, earthworm populations, and then ultimately taking that through to yield in the following spring barley crop, which we did with the yield meter on the combine. We cut sort of the strips out through the middle. That was all analysed. That raw data was sent off to NIAB to have a look at that. So we're deploying quite a lot of.
It sounds like that's an awful lot of work, Jake. Was it easy to manage? Did you, how did you, on a busy farm, how on earth do you manage to do all these extra bits?
Well, yeah, I think you need to. You need to keep learning. You need to keep being curious, and you need to keep looking at what's coming down the line. And we're fortunate in we undertook this journey 10, 12 years ago, and through experimentation. I mean, on that cover trial, we took all day to drill a 7-hectare field. Because every different mix needed to go into the drill, be calibrated, and there were 13, I think, different mixes and straits. Wow. So actually, the productivity that day was, pretty poor. We drilled,
what you learned from it,
7 hectares. But what we've learned from that since 2014 has been hugely beneficial. In terms of different mixes, we still use some of them today. Being part of that wider collaborative network, if you like. So, Jim Egan, who was at King's at the time, who supplied the seeds, great mates with him now. Huge wealth of knowledge that we can tap into. The team at NIAB who did the work, the Kellogg's team, Duncan and Jill that run that. Hugely beneficial. So yes, you might think at the time, goodness, we would normally plant 40 hectares. Today we've done 7. That's not very good. But actually, what we've learned from that subsequently has really underpinned a lot of the kind of the decision-making process for the next decade and then going forward. Yeah. So whatever you do trial-wise, it does take time. It takes time out of your the day-to-day running of the farm. But actually, you need to think about what that investment is going to deliver, over the next rotation or 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, and of course, you weren't working on your own in this. You were part of a group of farmers, I think, all part of the same project. Was it the 10 or
Yeah.
12 farmers?
There's 10 or 12 farmers in the Kellogg's Origins group, but actually those doing the trials, there was probably 6 farms,
Right.
from Yorkshire across, sort of Cambridgeshire down to us, and
And
all those
you
results were
shared
all
the
pooled as
information?
well. All the information was shared amongst
Yeah,
ourselves and the wider group then as well.
yeah,
And it came, it was Ron Stobart at NIAB who actually used some of that work to create their sort of cookbook, if you
yeah.
like, of cover crop mixes. So again, that's work done here, and then that is now available for the whole industry to be able to see. We're doing some work with Reading University at the moment, a Horizons 2020 project. Again, looking at cover crops actually, 4 different mixes and a fallow to have a look at the impact on biodiversity. So they've been out with hoovers, hoovering up spiders and
Right.
counting worms and looking at organic matter sampling,
Yeah.
and we're waiting to get some of the results back from that. But that's hugely beneficial for the business, for the industry. But also, if I want to go and sell a cover crop to somebody, to say, look, here's your commitment. You might be downstream from us. Pay for us to put a cover crop in, and these are the benefits that we'll be able to deliver: more spiders, more earthworms, better water infiltration, less erosion, less runoff, less phosphate, less nitrate in the water, and here's the evidence for it. So
Yeah.
all of those things put together make a very compelling kind of argument, if
No,
you like, to help people to change their farming system as well. So it's
yeah.
educating customers, other farmers, and also trying to add more income streams to the business.
Well, no, I mean that's really what I wanted to talk about. Let's move to the aspects of BOFIN. And of course, the British On-Farm Innovation Network. I mean, it was set up to represent farmers like yourselves who do on-farm trials. And specifically, I mean, one of the aspects that you talked about there, Jake, was the element of the work that you do that is beneficial for all farmers. And one of the things that we're looking to encourage at BOFIN or look for are projects that offer the farmers involved in it actual payment for the work that they're doing, reward to recognise the public benefit of the work that they're doing. I just wanted to quickly get your view on that first of all, whether whether this is something that we should be doing, whether it's something that's important to you that farmers should get paid for this work.
Farmers do an awful lot for nothing, and actually, I was having this conversation on Monday with some leaf people actually about should demonstration farmers be paid for their time, because it is delivering a public good, if you like. It's also delivering a private good and to the farming business, and I think that's probably where there's a little bit of a grey area. And I know one of those businesses does actually charge for farm visits and farm walks now, quite a big business. And I wonder whether that's something that we need to look at a little bit more in terms of, if people come for a freebie visit, are they going to take it in, and are they going to be serious about doing it? If they have to part with 20, 30, 40 pounds worth, some of it going for charity, some of it going to cover our time here, are they actually going to take... They're going to be more involved in that visit? Are they genuinely looking to explore and change their system, or are they just day off the farm sort of thing? And I think that's something that we need to just have a little bit of a think about as well. There's a degree of charitable stuff with Leaf, and some of the demonstration farms we haven't spoken about is Farmer Time, which I do every other Friday on my phone with a school in Lincolnshire that I'm twinned with, Washingbury Academy. Brilliant school, and I've got one tomorrow actually, so it's on FaceTime. This is what we're doing on the farm today. We're drilling, we're combining, we are looking at conservation, we're looking at the sheep, lambing, foaling, whatever. That's a really, really good thing to do, and I know, I'm going to little plug now, I know that they're looking for farmers to be able to do that, which is, if you just Google Farmer Time, you'll find all the information there, but organised through Leaf.
Yeah, no,
but actually, yeah, go on, Tom.
As you say, Farmer Time, a really, really important initiative, and for those, it's a really good thing to be involved in. I wanted to focus on a couple of trials for 5 minutes, if that's okay. There's a couple of projects that we've got ongoing, and these are projects that are public-funded projects. We're very grateful to Innovate UK. They're part of the DEFRA Farming Innovation Programme, funded by DEFRA through Innovate UK, who are managing the programs, helping us manage the programs. And there are payments within these for farmers who get involved. And this is public payments. We've only just started some of them. We're just getting underway with some of the trials this autumn. There are a couple of projects I know that you're involved in, Jake. And first of all, harvest weed seed control. So this is a project looking at the Redicop seed control unit that Jake has mentioned earlier. This is a unit that is used widely in Canada and Australia, especially it goes on the back of the combine and it mashes up the weed seeds that come out the back, so you get good control of some of those really tricky to tackle grass weeds like ryegrass and to a certain extent blackgrass. Now, I know that you've had a unit operating on your farm for the past couple of years, Jake. So could you just tell us a little bit about some of the main findings that you've had from this unit?
Yeah, so we've run it for 2 seasons now, 2 very different seasons. The first harvest, 22, everything was bone dry, and day after day we were just combining. 2023 harvest was at the other end of the scale. Probably much more normal, but we've sort of forgotten what normal is these days in agriculture. So very, very wet, stop-start harvest. And the weed seed controller takes all the chaff and everything that comes off the sieves and puts it into, as you described, sort of a spinning mill, if you like, and it's spinning at, so I think about 2,800, 3,000 RPM. So everything that goes in there kind of bounces around, gets cracked, and then gets pushed out back into the flow through the straw chopper. So we've had it for 2 years, and the work that NIAB have been doing, again collaboratively with the 4, I think it is, seed control units that are out on the farm, looking at populations of weeds before harvest, populations that have grown in the sort of subsequent stubbles. I think they're showing a sort of 98% kill rate of what enters into the combine. So
yeah,
for us, if I got my integrated farm management hat on again, we're looking at how can we reduce the needs for chemical control for things. So we're looking at sort of resistance and resistance strategy. So how can we minimise those risks over time? I think it's a rotational solution. We'll have different crops ripening at different times. The challenge with the seed control unit is to get those weed seeds into the combine so that we can kill them.
Yeah.
So some seasons, I think some will have shed before we get there, but those that enter the combine are pretty much being terminated through that sort of through the mill.
Yeah.
So
and that's been one of the aspects of the project that we've been running this year with NIAB. And we've had, I think it's 40 seed scouts who have been collecting seeds in front of the combine. As Jake mentions, we know that there's 98% of what actually passes through the unit is mashed up by the seed control unit. What we don't know is how much of the seed is actually standing before harvest. And that's the data that we've been gathering thanks to, as I say, about 40 seed scouts who have gathered their seed. So there's more information on this within another podcast that we've done in a previous episode. And there's also more information on that through our YouTube channels as well. But I just wanted to find out from you, Jake, in terms of your experience with the seed control unit, what was it like having this unit on the back of the combine?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a stop-start with it, really. So 2022, we were due a new combine in from John Deere. It got held up, so we actually retrofitted it to our old combine, which was fortunately still on the farm. So it went on a John Deere 685, and then for this harvest 23, the new one arrived, so it's on a 790 now. It's quite loud, which if you're in the cab is not a problem at all. You can't really hear it then, but you can tell when we start combining, probably within around 3 or 4 villages,
Yeah.
So it is quite
Have you had any
loud.
complaints from neighbours or anything?
No, again, part of the sort of social media and the communication work that we try and do, and we don't always succeed on it, is to have an education element of what we're doing with our local community. So before we went out, I would try and let people know when the combine's coming, so they can close windows, don't put washing out. And then we also did a whole piece on our Facebook page about the seed control unit to say, it's not broken. This is how it sounds.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an inconvenience, but the reasons that we're doing it is so that we can use less pesticide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we try to be as proactive as we can in giving people the heads up as to what they're going to expect. So it uses a bit more diesel than
I was
we
going to ask about that,
historically were. So we're using probably 2 litres per hectare more.
Right.
So
Is
depending on where
is
you...
is that an expense that you can justify, Jake?
Yes, I think we can. I mean, diesel is 80p a litre, I think, at harvest this time. So, £1.60 a hectare, which is, it adds up, but it's the longer term game, I think, of, if we can save a £50 a hectare herbicide spray, in a few years' time, then, yeah, it kind of makes sense. We won't know about that till we get there. And it's probably going to be a rotation before we can really track changes. So it does use a bit more horsepower. So with this year, with the wet harvest, we were slightly horsepower limited, even with a bigger combine. But again, you can live with that for the sort of the bigger picture. It was on a few fields where we've got hills, and things were working a bit hard. We just had to back off. So it's a bit of a compromise, but then farming is a compromise.
Yes.
Full
Absolutely.
stop. No decision is kind of almost ever the right one.
Yeah.
There's always a trade-off, and
Absolutely.
you've just got to try and balance. You've just got to try and balance and try to get the right decisions made more often than the wrong ones.
Great. Well, so Jake, I want to move on to soils now, and I know that this is an area that you're particularly interested in. And of course, we've had a project going on at the beginning of this year with Boffin and the Crop Science Centre, looking at arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and the soil communities around that. So we've been working with Dr. Tom Thurkel, and if you want to find out more about this project, we've got another that's included in our first episode, actually the podcast of that, including some of the results that Tom runs through as well. But this was a project in which we had really good interest actually from I think about 80 Boffin members who wanted to be involved in this, including yourself, I believe, Jake. But I know that this is an area that is of real interest for you. So just describe some of the work that you've been doing on your soils, looking at your soils and trying to get an understanding of your soils.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. Soil is something that I think has probably gone a little bit under the radar on most farming businesses for sort of quite a few years, and it's just now starting to come back under the microscope in more ways than one, in terms of actually how a healthier soil and a healthier soil ecosystem can help build resilience and grow crops with less inputs or less artificial man-made inputs. So soil at the heart of Overbury really has been key. We are a south-facing farm, quite slopey in places, so historic soil erosion is something that we have had to deal with. And I guess focusing on that and what we can do to try and reverse some of those issues has led us into the sort of regenerative agriculture path and direct drilling, cover cropping, keeping it covered with a soil armour layer of something growing or residue on it has been really key. But we're also starting to deep dive a little bit deeper to try to have a better understanding of soil organic matter, measuring that on and off over the last sort of 20 years, but more regularly now. That has a huge role to play in water and carbon capture and storage. And then the thing that we probably don't know enough about yet, which is why these projects are so fascinating, is how do we get a better handle on the microbiology and the microorganisms that are in the soil, and the impact that our actions, whether physical or chemical, have on those populations, and what that impacts, or how that impacts the growing of the crops. So these sorts of projects are absolutely fascinating, and there's so much we don't know, and we're just scratching the surface, literally, of that whole soil food web.
Well, I'm really glad you say that, Jake, because that is exactly what this new project that I can exclusively announce today is going to be all about. So this
Fantastic.
is Truth, and many members of Boffin and those who listen to the podcast will know that we've talked about Truth before as a project that we were hoping to get underway. Well, the good news is that we have got the funding. It's going to start on the 1st of January. So Truth stands for Thriving Roots Underpin Total Soil Health. There's a stray S in there, which unfortunately I can't get rid of, but never mind. And this is a project that involves, we've got the University of Nottingham involved in this, who are going to be giving us some really valuable information about how roots interact with the soil. We've also got John Innocenter, and they're involved through the Wish Roots project. This is a really exciting project that's looking at the root architecture of some of these forgotten or landrace varieties. We've also got some Watkins lines in there as well. The root architecture of these, some interesting lines there that we're going to be looking at in more detail. And we've also got PES involved. So PES have got a really interesting, PES Technologies have a really interesting sensor that can actually smell the soil, and that uses the volatiles that the soil gives off to give a really accurate picture of what sort of microbes we've got in the soil. So we're going to be developing that sensor, and we're looking at specifically the interaction between the roots and the soil, because Jay, we know so much about what goes on above the ground, with all the canopy, GAI, and so on and so forth, and the measurements that we take. We know precious little about what goes on below the ground. So what we're looking to do here is look at it intensively with this soil platform that we're calling Truth, and that's going to give us some really accurate measurements and things. But then through that, we should be able to get some proxy measurements that we can use with these really interesting novel sensors that PES have been developing to get a good idea, a really accurate picture of what our soils are doing, what our roots are doing with those soil microbes as well. So I sincerely hope that's a project that you would like to be involved with, Jake.
Most definitely, Tom. Yes, yeah, no, we'll put some time aside to get involved thoroughly with that. It's hugely interesting and very. I hadn't heard about the sensor sort of sniffing soil, because that's one of my key senses actually for assessing soil health. Because when you break it open and you actually sniff that soil, it can tell you so much about what we think is going on in there. But again, we don't really know. But you think if things smell good, there probably are some good things going on.
And that's the thing. That's why these projects are so important, Jake, because it marries our sort of innate ability to know what's good about a soil or a system or a crop or whatever, with the actual scientific measurements. So that element of when you sniff a soil and you can smell the goodness in it or whatever, it's that goodness that we're looking to put actual figures onto with this project. And I believe the way the sensor works is it will actually give you an idea of what microbes you've got within your soil, and so it'll give us a pretty accurate picture of what's going on there. But
is that microbes, Tom, in terms of bacterial and fungal sort of diversity?
I think so, yes. To be honest, I think we're in the very early stages of understanding using of what the PES sensor can actually tell. But what we're doing through the project is we're going to do some DNA analytics. So it's the DNA analytics that will tell us actually what's going on down there and what microbes we've got, and then that will then relate to the measurements from the PES sensor, and so we'll be able to give a proxy measurement. Obviously, no farmer is going to have the resources all the time or whatever to send off loads and loads and loads of samples to the lab for DNA analytics. But what we're hoping is that the PES sensor will give them a proxy measurement of that, a quick and easy measurement in the field is the idea. So really, really exciting project there. But I also wanted to just touch on another project that we've got underway at the moment. This is the NCS project. So it's Nitrogen Climate Smart is what that stands for. And this is looking at pulse crops within the rotation. So the aim of this project, it's a 4-year project. We've got 18 industry partners on this project. And it's the idea is to get more pulses grown in the rotation. So building that from 5% currently in the arable rotation up to 20%. And then on the other end, looking at getting more of it included into livestock diets. And so cutting out a lot of the imported soya that we currently have and using homegrown pulses instead. So the aim is to cut about 50% of the imported soya out of livestock feed rations, and that's mainly ruminants, but also poultry and hopefully pigs as well. Although the pig project, the science behind that was really done by the Green Pig Project. We're looking to do on-farm trials to get farmers involved, and farmers will be paid to be involved in these trials. And we've just decided that we're looking at what trials we're going to start to get underway, and we're looking to get a platform, a rotational platform underway where farmers will do some measuring and monitoring. Those farmers who've got a pulse crop within their rotation will do some measuring of what that is doing to the health of their soils overall. And I know, Jake, that you've got pulses in your rotation, I believe, isn't that right?
We have, yes. Yeah, winter beans for the last sort of 3 years. Then we also had some hand-picked peas as well with a veg-growing tenant. That's sadly stopped now, but they weren't in the ground for a particularly long period of time, those peas, 100 days, 115 days. So I think the benefits that sort of the nodulation and the nitrogen fixing and the residual N wasn't quite achieved because those crops are in the ground for, say, a relatively short period of time. But winter beans are something I'm very enthusiastic about, although harvesting them this year, to be honest, I wasn't enthusiastic. And I think that's part of the challenge. How do we make pulse crops pay on the farm?
Yeah, well,
because they do. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, they do have such huge benefits rotationally, and from a soil health point of view, we're also putting quite a lot of legumes in our cover crops because I think that ability to capture nitrogen and make it available for the subsequent crops is a hugely underestimated free resource that we need to be tapping into. So, clovers in grass lays, herbal lays, vetches in cover crops, particularly a berseem clover, and then combinable crops, beans as well, is a key part of what we're trying to do.
Well, you touched on a point there that's quite an important part of the project. As I say, it's a farmer-led project, and we are looking actively for farmers to tell us what their key priorities are. And you touched on one there, I think, Jake, in terms of the improving the actual profitability from beans themselves. So what are the problems there, do you think?
I think they are quite susceptible. So there's a few things. They're quite susceptible, I think, to climatic extremes at certain times of their growth stage. So flowering, pod fill needs to be kind of a bit more of an average climate, if that makes sense. Not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry. I think the other challenge we have is a political one, and beans and oats have been just taken off of the niche crop registration. So actually our herbicide choices for beans now is really limited and has got very expensive. So the government wants us to become more net zero, have less impact on climate, and beans and peas can do that. But actually, let's try and help farmers by not putting obstacles like removal of emus on certain products into the rotation, which is just adding cost to an already marginal crop to grow. So we do have some significant challenges actually in terms of maintaining, but let alone increasing the area within the rotation.
Well, that's aspects that I hope that we can explore through this project. As I say, it's a 4-year project, so we've got quite a lot of years where we're looking at, and we're also linking up with experimental platforms that are run by the likes of James Hutton Institute and also PGRO have got access to a few experimental plots as well, and we're looking to bring the science that they're getting on those plots out into field and into sort of commercial scale plots, if you like. And I hope that we're going to be addressing some of these issues that you highlight there, in terms of consistency, in terms of facing up to the reduced herbicide armoury and so on, so that we can get a more consistent return from pulse crops over the course of the project. But for those of you who'd like to be involved, if you go to ncsproject.co.uk, you can sign up and join the Pulse PEP, which is the community that we have around this project. It's free to join. There's absolutely no obligation, and we've also got an area on the Farming Forum. So if you go to the Farming Forum and have a look in the forums there, you'll find a knowledge in farming section. Pulse PEP sits within that. The discussion is going on as we speak. Only those people who are signed up to the Pulse PEP will actually be able to contribute or ask questions on that forum. But everyone can see it. Everyone can see the discussion that's going on. There's already some really valuable content on there. You'll also find on there the Slimers forum as well for our slug circle. And there's some really good content on there looking at, for example, patch location forecasting and things. And again, that's where the discussion on slugs will happen. And finally, there is also the Harvest Weed Seed Control Forum and the Seed Circle on there. And I hope that, Jake, you're going to be contributing to that one. You are very much a member of the Seed Circle. You are one of our valued farmers who are trialling the SCUs, and we need the experience that you've got to come onto the forum. And if there's any sort of comments or questions that you want to address, then please do. And indeed, anyone who's signed up to any of our communities, please do come onto the forums because knowledge has value. The more we share that knowledge, the more valuable it becomes, and there is no knowledge that is more valuable than that is held by farmers. So listen, Jake, this has been such an interesting journey. Thank you so much for talking us through, sharing your journey in farming, and also looking in detail at some of the really interesting aspects that you've got going on at Overbury. What's the next step for Overbury for you? What's the challenge that you're really looking to address at the moment?
I think they're huge. We've got a few different enterprises that we're looking to bring onto the farm. So we need to get those kind of teed up and implemented, and that will bring some bit more diversification and some different income streams as well. So yeah, there's a few things, and just fine tuning probably a lot of what we're doing around the cover cropping and making sure the rest of the arable and sheep enterprises are singing along quite well. So yeah, there's always something to be looking at.
No, there is indeed. Well, look, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of your involvement in all of the projects that we've got, and I sincerely hope that you'll carry on helping out on those and also contributing to them. And then I hope that they'll be of value to you and your business, Jake, as I hope it will be for everyone who's involved. And please do get involved. If you haven't joined already, if you go to boffin.org.uk, you can join. It's free. There's no obligation, and you can get access to all the exciting areas that Jake and I have been talking about today. So, well, that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much, Jake Freestone from Overbury Enterprises. Thank you all for listening, and join us next time. Goodbye.